Today on Adolescence, we're going to talk about the truth behind EV range and how that compares to gas. Since getting my EV, especially now in winter, the question that I get asked most frequently is, what's the car like? Usually meaning, how far will the car go? We're going to break down range. And to break down range, we're going to actually have to talk apples to apples about the energy on board and actually convert that to the usable energy, which is what's used to drive the car. And really, that is a conversation about the energy on board, how much of it is accessible or usable, and how much does it cost to refill that energy to get down the road again. Now, we treat EV cars because they're all full of tech and everything as if they're the next best thing. But we really want to realize that these cars are still evolving battery technology. They're still standardizing what type of charging cables and standards that they use. It's not like a gas car where we just pull up to the same gas station, hopefully don't put in diesel and proceed, right? So we've had since 1908 when Mr. Ford delivered the first Model T. That was the first gas car, and we are now comparing and talking about gas cars that have evolved to be way faster, have way more power, and go way further. So EVs are still doing that. However, they've come far enough in the last few years that they really do have enough energy on board, enough capability to take care of what 90% of us do for daily driving. As long as you're not driving more than 200 kilometers in a day before you can get back to your overnight charger, that is way more well within the capability of today's crop of cars. So I'm going to talk about my Mach-E, and in comparison, a nice comparison car would be something like a Bronco Sport or the Ford Edge, just to stay underneath the same umbrella. Now, that being said, most cars have a fuel tank that is around 50 to 60 liters. Many of them, especially in SUV, are larger. Now, gasoline, 87 octane gasoline, has about 9 kilowatt hours per liter. And if we talk about diesel, that's about 10 kilowatt hours per liter. So by the time you have a 50-liter tank with a gas car, you could be talking about 444 kilowatts on board. And a diesel car would be essentially have up to 500 kilowatts on board. However, the efficiency changes. So the efficiency of a gas car is roughly in the order of 30% after you've made a bunch of noise and exhaust gases and gotten a bunch of reciprocating mass in your valves and flywheel and all of that. So you're only about 30% efficient. A hybrid boosts that efficiency to about 50% of using the energy within the fuel. And you're about just there with some of your newer diesel engines as well. So your diesel engines and your hybrid engines get to use 40 or so percent, and a gas car will use 50% of the energy on board inside that fuel. So that being said, after you've taken the efficiency into account, our comparison to begin with is going to be a 100 kilowatt hour battery. And we are going to compare that against 50 liters of fuel. So after that 50 liters of fuel, that 444 kilowatts and the 30 or so percent efficiency, you still get about 130 kilowatts of usable energy if you're driving a gas car. You get to use around 140 to 150, maybe 160 kilowatt hours of usable energy on board with a diesel car or a hybrid car. So again, my comparison is a 100 kilowatt hour battery. So all of our cars, even at a 50 liter size for the fuel tank, has more energy than a 100 kilowatt hour battery. As I said, most of our cars have a much larger gas tank on board, which again will exasperate how much further they go. That being said, the Ford that I'm driving, the small battery is 72 kilowatt hours usable, and the large battery is 91 or so kilowatt hours usable, less than the 100 that I'm using for my comparison, which then again shows that these cars are going to go even less compared to the gas cars. Their range is going to be stretched even further, or constricted even further. They just can't go as far. So what does that look like? Now, I want to explain that in this table, when I'm saying 100% of this theoretical range, we're saying that all of these cars are going to go the same distance at 100% under these conditions. So a gas car in the city and the highway versus a electric car in the city and that sort of things, or we're talking about where these cars are actually their best. So taking that into account about how far these cars will go based on their theoretical best range, then use a regular gas car as our control. And we're going to talk about summer range versus winter range in our typical gas car. So in the summer, on the highway, let's just say that car goes about 100% of its best distance. And on the highway in the winter, at best, it can get about 85%. In the city in the summer, that car will probably get 70% of its best range. And in the winter, that gas car will probably only get 60% of its best range. Looking at a hybrid, we can look at the hybrid in the city is where it gets 100% of its best range in the summer. A hybrid in the summer on the highway might only get 90% of its best range. And that pretty much holds right through for the most part for hybrids, except they're less efficient on the highway and less efficient in the winter simply because they're stressing that small engine on board a lot more. Now, when we go to an EV undoubtedly gets its best range in the summer in the cities. On the highway, it might get 70% of that range. In the winter in the city, it might get 80% of that range. And on the highway in the winter, an EV might only get 60% of that range. So I'm going to put that up on a table right now so we can... So getting back to the comparison, like I said, in the case of the Ford Edge, and you could probably look at a Bronco Sport or something similar for a comparison as well. The Ford Edge is a $35,000 car versus the Mach-E, which would be a $50,000 car. We're not even going to get into the incentives right now because what that does is change your payback period. Now, the gas car has a 70-liter gas tank. It's already 40% larger than what I used in my comparison. And the Mach-E has a 72 kilowatt hour battery. Now, when we talk about the efficiency of running these two cars, the highway efficiency of the gas car is 8.5 liters per 100. The city efficiency is 11.6. These are the EPA numbers. We usually know that cars never meet these numbers, so it's naturally likely to consume more electricity on the road, more gasoline on the road, than the EPA number is expects. So getting back to the comparison, the $35,000 Edge with a 70-liter fuel tank that gets about 8.5 liters per 100 on the highway and 11.6 liters per 100 in the city versus the $50,000 Mach-E with a 72 kilowatt hour battery that gets in the summer I've seen 14 kilowatt hours per 100, sometimes less on some trips, and in the winters like now I get up to sometimes 40 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. And so if we actually take the battery size and its worst range and its worst efficiency, we get this range. And when we swap that for its worst efficiency, we get this range. And now when we compare that to the gas car, well, if we take its efficiency and its gas tank size and we do some math, we get this range for city and we get this range for the highway. So while it doesn't actually look good for the EV, really and truly what we see is most people, me included, I really spent the majority of my time on city driving, which is the best case scenario for the EV and the worst case scenario for the car. And once you start to figure out how much you pay for electricity and how much you got to pay for gas to replenish that, your numbers will vary in your different areas. But there's the short reason why gas cars really rule when it comes to range. It is because they have more energy on board, but EVs really close that gap in the city because that's where they work best. So buy the car that works best for what you are going to use it for. And on that, let's stay connected.